Hello, viewers, and welcome to the team chat for Monster Energy Supercross 2. Well, Monster Energy Supercross kind of came out of left field last year and was surprisingly good. Graphics were impressive. Milestone have improved a lot since the development of MXGP3, and they sort of continued that advancement right through Supercross 2 and, of course, MXGP Pro this year. So it was back to Supercross then. Again, like last year, we hadn't seen much of the game in the build-up. In fact, we'd seen nothing of it, frankly. It's all sort of been hidden behind closed doors pretty much until release. Now, I'm joined here today by Kevin.
Hi, guys.
And we're going to talk a little bit about the game. We've had some early access, pretty late access, given the game's actually out this week. But we can talk a bit about it now and see how it's developed. So, Kevin, you've played quite a bit more of this than me. You've been working on the review, which will be on the Team VV website. Tell me your thoughts on Monster Energy Supercross and how it's moved forward on last year.
Yeah, so I mean, clearly Milestone have sort of taken into account the complaints from last year's title, particularly the stiffness of the rider, which was very obvious. Even if you've only spent a couple of minutes with the original title, the rider was very stiff. It almost seemed like the rider and bike were the same entity. They all sort of moved together, and it looked very awkward. Whereas in number 2 now, they've very much freed up the movement of the rider and the bike. They're very separate now. There's a much more fluid nature to it, and it just feels more realistic and looks, of course, more realistic as a result of that. So, if that was one area that you was particularly, you couldn't really get on with, I guess, with the first game, there certainly has been such an improvement here that it just feels like almost like a different game. So that's one area they've really improved on. Visually, I think the game has come on as well. It does look particularly good. The lighting is actually probably one of the biggest improvements, because before you had these stadium tracks at night, they were floodlit, and I found in the first game that they weren't lit bright enough. They came across a little bit sort of dimly lit, and it didn't. The visuals didn't pop. It just felt a bit dull. The lighting was a little bit off. Whereas in Supercross 2, it's very well lit. It's very brilliant light, and it really sort of showcases the sort of ground detail more as well, which also has seen improvements, I might add, as well as sort of the rutting that goes on when the bikes go over the dirt, leaving the trails behind. Those ruts are deeper now than before, which I guess is not that surprising given the fact that they released MXGP Pro recently, which really sort of aimed for that sort of authentic feeling with the various aspects of the physics and the ground deformation as well.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that grabbed me was the graphics. I mean, it was noted to me actually by Tom, who's been working on our Team VV Games channel, that he felt that the PS4 version looked a little bit blurry in a way. It wasn't everything wasn't as clear as perhaps it could be. And I can see that it's slightly different to the PC version. I will point out the PC version is outstanding. I would say it's some of the best graphics on any racing game ever. I mean, there really is some fantastic spot effects in there. The wet weather conditions in particular are very special on the PC. When you're seeing it running, maximum detail, 60 frames, really smooth, game comes alive. It's almost a different game to what you see on the consoles. I mentioned that before with games such as V-Rally, completely different running on the PC to how they look on console. It's amazing what a difference that bit of frame rate and resolution can make. And I think you can see lots of little improvements to the rider and the way the rider moves, mud effects, particle effects, stuff like that. So visuals, first off, they were impressive last year. I mean, we showed the GoPro camera on the helmet and everybody thought it was real footage, except for the rider was able to do stuff he just wouldn't be able to do in real life, like land on the top of a hump really awkwardly and get away with it. Which takes me to the next thing then. Graphics are great, but gameplay is very challenging. Now, this year they've introduced a new, I think it's the flow system, which shows you where you take off and where you land. Now, when you have a straight and it has maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 jumps on it, some jumps you literally leap over entirely. You don't land on all of them, and you don't always know what speed you're supposed to go at, where you're supposed to take off and land. For those that know the sport and the circuits inside out, they'll know it. But for the rest of us that don't watch this on TV, we don't know where you're supposed to land. So you just go off a jump and hope for the best. And this flow system has been really helpful in terms of being a racing line that shows you where you're supposed to move through the air. I say helpful it doesn't change color in terms of your
No,
speed.
no.
And so you're still landing in completely the wrong place, but at least you know where you're supposed to land.
Yeah.
But it still takes a long time to learn the courses. The courses are very challenging. I'd say it's even more challenging than last year, getting it just right. And we've talked about the scrubs a lot. And scrubs are great when you're an expert and you know the course, because you know as soon as you've taken off, I've made a mistake here. I've jumped too far, or I've not jumped far enough. If you've not jumped far enough, generally it's curtains. There's nothing you can do about it. If you've jumped too far and you can throw in a scrub really quickly, you might be able to get the bike down and prepare yourself for the next jump. Very challenging indeed. I would say that I've been playing it on medium, and getting top 10 finishes is really tough on medium. You know, you fall off your bike once and you're probably going to be down to 8th place, you know, so it's challenging. And you know, some of the little bumps and jumps, you've really got to keep some momentum in the bike, because as soon as you lose momentum,
that's right.
The bike slows down. And another aspect of that is weather conditions again. The weather conditions aren't just pretty to look at this time. They make a huge difference to the speed and performance of the bike, which is great to see. I mean, it could have just been a nice bit of gloss on top, but it really is a significant, authentic feeling difference in terms of how the bike digs into the dirt and how it struggles to get traction and how traction works. The bike feels heavier to control in the wet conditions through the mud. So there's a lot of work gone into the gameplay side of things there, but just riding the bike is one challenge on its own. Learning the course, learning where you're supposed to jump, take off a jump and land is hugely challenging. And then when it comes to the races itself, you know, all the other bikers moving around, you've really got to learn, you know, how to take your line, where best to overtake. You don't be landing on top of other guys, getting taken out yourself or taking others out. Really essential, getting an idea on how best to attack the course in any given condition, and very challenging. I think that if there are players complaining the previous version was too easy, I'd say this version to me has felt like a big increase in challenge. What have you made of the gameplay aspect and the challenge, Kevin?
It is a very challenging game, but I mean, I've got experience with the original title and MXGP Pro more recently. So I guess it took about maybe 5 minutes, if that, to adjust to the new physics. There definitely was a learning curve, but for me, it was very short-lived because I was sort of more or less, it almost felt a bit like MXGP Pro, I guess. So it was a short learning experience, but then I got to grips with it pretty quickly. But yeah, it is a challenging game, of course. You have very narrow sections and you've only got to touch those little bits at the side and that's it. You know, you're going to probably come off your bike or you're going to knock the bike sideways or whatever, or stop completely. So it leaves very little margin for error, a game like this. So, you know, it certainly will be a massive challenge for the more sort of casual market. But I guess it's going to be a game mainly for Supercross fans, and judging by the original, I think they've come quite a long way in these areas that we've mentioned already. But there are some areas that will need improvement as well, which we will discuss shortly. But you know, it's a decent game. You know, it has some very impressive physics, I would say. Although I still don't like the way the bikes go around the turn. Sometimes I feel they understeer too much, and you're fighting the dirt a little too much to get the bikes round. Whereas in the original, they seem to sort of snap around a lot tighter, and the rear brakes were a lot snappier. So that might be a bit jarring for some players at start, just to get used to the sort of bikes turning in quite slowly around these sort of turns, 180-degree turns. But as you mentioned earlier, with the flow aid system, it gives you the trajectory of your jumps. So you can, you know, you learn eventually whether it's a double or a triple jump, how much throttle you'll need to use. So initially, it won't do a lot for your game, but once you learn the tracks, it does actually serve as an aid. But what I will say is, if once you get a reasonable idea of the track, it's probably best to turn those flow aid systems off, and then you can sort of attack the track without that. So initially, you know,
I did turn them off actually pretty quickly. I mean, for me, I felt they were
intrusive.
Yeah, and I like the concept of them, but they for me, I do generally switch this.
Like you say, you needed that to change color to tell it whether to accelerate or brake.
Yeah,
you need to match the speed. That's where it's got to go in the future. You have to have a flow aid system that actually allows for the speed you're going at. Then you'll have a really good training aid, I feel.
Yeah, that would make
it's
a
a good
big
start, but
difference.
it's not quite there, is it?
No, it's a good start, good concept, and
Yeah,
I hope they can build on it. And like you
Yeah.
say, get you with that run up. You mentioned a couple of things there. The bikes do understeer quite a bit into a lot of corners. It's hard getting them into the corners in quite the way I would like sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think that's something to change. Also, the bikes have a speed sensitivity issue, whereby if you're going very slowly, you lose control of the bike,
Yeah.
and then it's really hard. You'll find yourself
Yeah.
zigzagging from side to side. Just so difficult getting control again. If the bike goes below a certain speed, it just completely loses control.
There's no traction, is there? And that's the thing.
No.
It's typical in racing games, though. You have this low speed physics that are wonky, and we've seen this in many titles over the years. It seems to be an area that's very hard to get right. And like you say, you're struggling for traction. Even if you sort of just squirt the throttle a little bit, you're still sort of squirming around that rear wheel, and you're not getting any traction. You're just sort of spinning the wheels up. And it can really mess up your race if you get yourself in a situation such as that. So maybe in those situations, maybe like a manual respawn button would help get you back on a sort of a nice sort of bit of dirt that you can lay the throttle down and go.
Well, yeah, just something to help with the low speed oversensitivity, whereby, you know, whether it means that they build something into the handling whereby it has a high speed and a low speed sensitivity system inside it, just to help you keep control on low speeds, because it really does. The bike just zigzags and eventually flies off the course. You've got to almost slow. When you start losing control, you have to almost slow down and stop to regain control and then continue again. So it's a funny one on very slow corners when that happens, and then you find you just lose five.
The sand sections are particularly troublesome, I find. If you've got a tight section with sand, it's pretty bumpy, the sand. The ruts are massive in the sand. So if you're going along at low speed, you're in real trouble there. So yeah,
it will just bump you off the bike.
Yeah,
bump you off the bike basically.
Needs a bit of refinement there for sure.
Yeah, there's you can fly off your bike on some of these bumps, and some of the bumps that were quite simple in the previous game are
the whoops sections, the multiple bumps. Those are, I mean, before you didn't care about them, you just went over them pretty quickly. Same with MXGP, but here they're deeper, or there's something about them that's changed, because once you go over them, you can actually fall over your handlebars, you can lean back too much, go up in the air. There's definitely much more technical element to these whoops sections now, which will delight fans, because that's one of the things that they were crying out for. So
yeah, it is, and like you say, a lot more challenging. Well, the amount of times, I mean, I find that you have to carry a lot of speed into them. You really have to carry a lot of speed.
Commit
as you slow throughout sort of the journey going over them. You gradually got to lean back on your rider weight just to keep your front wheel up. Just so you can manage those last sort of couple of bumps, and then you're in the corner. And there's quite a lot more involvement of your rider weight and direction on this version than there was on the previous game. So yeah, lots technically to learn on the handling. I think there's a reasonable amount of depth there, but there's, as we always say, that there's a lot to build on in terms of improvements. And I think that Milestone have got a good foundation to build on here. Graphics, though, fantastic. You know, on the PC, wow, lush. But let's talk about other options. What else is new in this game, Kevin? And then we'll take on to some of the elements that sort of detract from it more.
Yeah, so I guess they've added some things in the career modes where you'd be presented with your week's events, and you can assign your rider to sort of training days or media days. And the idea is, if you take part in training and challenges, you can unlock one of 4 tracks in the compound area, which is your training area, which is like an open world area where you can sort of have a mess about with, which is it's quite fun actually. They've expanded this feature on many titles now. And this was actually a DLC in the original title, but here it's bundled into the base game free of charge, which is really good to see. And it's just a nice area where you can just sort of free roam. You can go over jumps and ramps and stuff, and you can go exploring and actually come across various obstacles. You know, so it does have a sort of a reward element, to exploration, which is always good to see. But back to the career mode, so the challenges unlock the tracks in the compound, whereas the media days and the publicity days give your rider cash and fame, which enables you need fame to unlock the main tier of the 450 tier for the championship, the career mode, whereas the money, of course, you can spend on your bike and rider upgrades and stuff. So it does have a little extra element added on, which it really did need, because we've seen, you know, particularly with these dirt bike games from Milestone, they're more or less copy and paste every year. So you do need something added just to give it a little bit of a twist. So it's good to see that. It's nothing revolutionary, but it just adds an extra element just to get you a little bit more invested in the sort of campaign. And you know, you really do have to unlock all these tracks in the compound, because, you know, they're worth playing, because they're pretty decent. But yeah, it's nice to see little improvements to the career modes. I guess going back to the handling, we could talk a bit about casing jumps, coming up short on jumps. You know, it really does affect your momentum more so than really ever before. So, you know, particularly if you get good momentum going, you can really overtake AI riders pretty easily if once you get that nice flow going. So if you've got like a few tabletops that you're just absolutely killing, you know, you can really sort of build up some nice momentum and get those overtakes, which is immensely satisfying, I might add. But again, it's back to learning the tracks, so you don't come up short on jumps and case them. So if you do case one jump in some areas, you end up casing 2, 3, 4 jumps. It can really mess up your rhythm. So there's a lot of technicality I find with Supercross games, which makes them very engaging for me compared to MXGP, which is more sort of full throttle experience, I guess. So it's a good alternative to MXGP. If you like the MXGP games, I think Supercross will appeal to you, because it is along the same lines, but it does have that extra element of technicality that you don't find necessarily in the MXGP series.
We had lots of spot effects, you know, like the fireworks and the flames at the start of a race. You know, that all looks really authentic. It gives you that sort of atmosphere and that feeling, like you say, of the crowd, of being there. And yeah, so just in terms of general detail, it's all there. And you know, from a handling aspect, I mean, I know we're looking at esports now, aren't we? And we're all these racing games are moving towards esports now. And you know, I guess they're wanting to make the games as authentic as possible in terms of replicating the real experience of the real riders. So the game, you can't replicate what it is to be on a bike, but if the gamers control all the same elements the real riders do, then that's the closest they can get in terms of simulating that experience and turning it into an esport of the future. Who knows where they're going with MXGP and Supercross in terms of that side of things. But no, graphics are great, lots of positive improvements on the whole throughout, but some negatives as well. Kevin, you've been playing it online, a few negatives there. Tell me a bit about it.
Yeah, so I've been playing on the PlayStation 4, and so far I've experienced, oh goodness, lots and lots of stuttering, riders lagging all over the place, oversensitive bumping as well. You know, a simple bump can send you flying, and it's just a bit of a mess right now, unfortunately. You know, it was a massive disappointment given the strengths of the single player campaign, all the various elements we've touched upon. It shows great promise, and then you go into online and it really does let the title down as a whole, which is a massive, massive shame.
That is a shame, isn't it? I mean, like you say, online is where so many of these games stand and fall. You know, it does seem strange when you look at games. A good example, such as Forza Motorsport 1, released 14 years ago or so, and you think there are games today that aren't as good as that in many respects. You know, the matchmaking doesn't work properly. There's no ranking system to rank players.
Yeah.
We've got sports system in, say, Gran Turismo that lots of us have said should have been in lots of games for many years. But then there's the basics, lag and you know, loading times and no spectator mode and stuff like that. And it just amazes me, really, when you have a checklist of, you know, in a way, a carbon copy system that you just need for every game. You know, it doesn't need to be different. The online MXGP and the options should all be the same. And yet, here we are with the basics not working. I know a lot of people will say, well, you know, you've got to test it and you can't imagine what it's like until it goes out to the general public. But what this tells me is there's not enough testing being done. Because, I get it. When you're launching a new Halo game, something like that, you're going to get, you know, millions of people online, and you're breaking the system, frankly, because everybody's doing a million different things they're not supposed to. But when you got, you know, when you've got Supercross, the online numbers aren't going to be
No, I mean, typically
ridiculous.
I've played with like half a dozen human players with the rest AI filling in the rest of the slots. And it's almost like the six are breaking the servers, it's
Yeah.
silly. There's no stress there, is there? Six players.
No.
I mean, it's nothing.
No, and that's
alarming, isn't it? The
I
fact that it
just
doesn't
find
work.
it's one of those things that, like we talk about audio, and we sometimes say what's the problem on some games with audio, and I had a good chat with a few sound designers recently, and the big problem for them, they said, was we record all the audio perfectly and we prepare it perfectly for the game, but then the audio is connected to the physics. So depending on where the engine's revving is depending on the audio note. And if those two things aren't correctly aligned, the audio or the physics have a hack in them and they've broken them a bit to make something work, it breaks the audio and then the audio doesn't work properly. And so then the audio guy gets blamed, even though he's put in perfect audio, but the physics guy has messed up. Little things like that I don't think are well enough broadcast to the public, really, in terms of who's at fault where and what's causing what problems. And I don't always understand what the big secret is either. It's like, fine, they changed the physics and that's messed up the audio, but nobody ever likes to admit they've done something wrong.
Maybe the audio guys are just too modest.
Maybe they're too modest. Easy to blame the audio guys, isn't it? And I think it's the same with all these games. But no, other than that, then, Kevin, I mean, for me at the moment, I think I've liked the improvement that I've seen this year. I hope they can fix the online. I think that's something that detracts from it.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you've seen in this version that you think, I wish they'd included that? What would you like to see in the future of the Monster Energy?
It's a difficult one to say, isn't it? Because it's a licensed title that they have very probably little room to innovate in some areas. But I guess for me, I really want to see what they can do with the compound area, because this is something they've added not only to Monster Energy but also to MXGP, and it seemed to be getting bigger and bigger each year and better. So I mean, could they carry on this compound and maybe one day evolve it into an open world game with bikes, which is unusual, but it has lots of potential there. If they can create maybe some obstacle courses, really go to town on it and make it a fun thing, right? Really, like almost like a Trackmania, they could have sections like that, as well as more sort of realistic sections. I'd really like to see them really go to town on the fun aspect of it, and maybe the exploration as well. You could have big areas where you just come across these amazing ramps and stuff. And I mean, there's a bit of that going on already, but there certainly is massive potential, I would say, for the compound. So I'd love to see that area really expanded in the future.
It has grown. I mean, I just found it a big empty area with nothing to do. I got bored of it very quickly, the compound. You'd find a bit of road and you think, oh, this looks exciting, I'll follow this road. And it'd be so difficult to follow that you'd fall off it and think, I'll give up now. Or there'll be a couple of ramps and you think, this is a cool jumping feature, and you'd fall off it and think, I'll give up now. Or you follow a road to its destination and it goes into a walled off area. And the problem with it is that you unlock parts of the compound as you play through the game. Invariably, a lot of the tracks are walled off because you're halfway around the track and suddenly it goes behind an area you can't race to. Also, it's deserted. There's nobody else there. And like you say, it'd be good to have some other bikes to say, do more with, more in the way of, like medals and challenges. And
exactly.
Just do something with it. I think that's that compound, because also Supercross is all during the night, isn't it? It all looks the same. It's different coloured dirt. But other than that, there's not much more they can do. I mean, that's one thing I like about MXGP is the tracks are all very different in terms of undulation.
Yes.
I mean, some of the undulation on some of those courses, I mean, that Italian course I went to last year, goodness me, you grow leg muscles walking around that. It's massive humps you're walking around all the time, up and down hill. The views are fantastic, out of this world, the mountain range. And they can't do that here. They've got big stadiums and everything else. So I think there's a lot can be done with a compound. It'd be interesting to see also if they can, I don't know, just develop the sort of training modes and facilities to get people more into it. It is very technical for those who don't play this type of game. Very technical. I'd actually say the difficulty curve is challenging on this game. So I think improvements to compound, improvements to just little elements, sort of scrubs, make them more intuitive and a bit faster.
Yeah, absolutely.
But improvements to the flow system, and also, difficulty curve, whether that means bringing in a new class of training bike, something like that. That would be good for learning the course. Whatever, there's lots of options that these games companies can come up with. I guess talk to the sports
It's
organisers.
difficult though, isn't it? I mean, if you did have a training bike, for instance,
Yeah.
you would have to learn the course differently once we got into 250s and the
Yeah.
450s. So
Yeah.
if you have like a 125, you might not be able to complete a triple. You might have to settle for a double jump. So it's almost like you have to relearn the track. So they're in a really unusual position. Very it's a difficult one to get around. If they can explain the basics, I guess, to the player better. I mean, there was like an optional training system the moment you start the game, which was good to see. I don't believe the first one had that. I think that was one of our complaints. It didn't have that in place. So they're off to the right track, but they've still got more to do to entice the more casual fan or the player that doesn't necessarily follow Supercross or know much about Supercross. It's that market they need to get, because otherwise the numbers are very niche, aren't they?
Too niche. This is a hard game, really hard game. Just staying on the bike around a lap is really, really hard, honestly.
Especially
I found
online.
it really difficult, especially online. I found it really difficult
Yeah.
Because you've got to learn the track. So it's something that they need to work on in terms of finding a balance there. Whatever that balance is, they've got to find that balance that creates a difficulty curve that gets people into understanding the bike and what kind of power and performance they need to do to run the bike well over a course. And that could mean training modes or anything else. There's lots of features that they can add to it, but they do need to make the game approachable for beginners as well as experts. But I can see you want it to be expert for these esport players and stuff like that, but you also need it to be approachable for Joe Public, who don't know the courses, don't follow it that closely, and just want to feel like a badass when they're riding around on a bike.
Yeah. So
these riders take 20 years to learn how to ride these bikes. People want to learn in 20 seconds, frankly. So it's another challenge. But I think that's about it really for today, Kevin. I think we've covered all the core issues there and aspects. And do let us know your thoughts on the Monster Energy Supercross 2 game, and your thoughts and feeling on terms of what you like and dislike about it, what format you're playing on, and what you'd like to see in this sort of motocross games of the future. Like I say, it's always good to get different opinions from a range of different players and really get your feedback. But that's it from me for now, and from Kevin for now. I hope you've enjoyed this little team chat, and there'll be more from us very soon.